My name is Carter King. I have elderly parents, but they are not my blood relatives. My real parents died in a car accident when I was very young. With no relatives to take me in, I was placed in a foster home and raised there until I was 5. Even though I felt lonely without a mother and father, I found joy in meal times with delicious food. One day, an elderly couple came to the facility. I vaguely remember them smiling happily as they watched me eat. They had such kind smiles. After a while, the couple, the Kings, decided to adopt me. I quickly opened up to them, calling them Grandpa and Grandma. They had a small garden where they grew vegetables and sold them at a local farmer's market. Though they didn't make much money, the leftovers from the market and the vegetables not good enough for sale ended up on our table every day. I love Grandma's pickled cucumbers and potato soup. Be thankful for your food, Grandpa always said. There are many people struggling without food today. We must be thankful for every meal, Carter. I hope you grow up to be someone who can help those who are hungry and in pain. I nodded seriously, and he smiled gently. His teaching stayed firmly in my heart. We lived a simple life without luxury, but were raised with a lot of love and happiness. I helped with the farming while attending high school. I thought about getting a job after graduation to help with the family finances. But Grandpa said, "Don't worry about money. Do what you want to do." I think he understood that I wanted to do something that would help people in the future. But at that time, I lacked the knowledge and didn't know where to start. I wanted to go to college to learn about social work, economics, logistics, and more. For times like these, Grandpa said as he handed me a bank book. The account was in my name, Carter King. He had been saving for my education. I was moved to tears by his thoughtfulness. After enrolling in college, I studied hard. I felt happy but also guilty for causing trouble for my grandparents. I had never seen them indulge in any luxuries. They always put me first. I vowed to repay their kindness in a big way once I started working, keeping that in mind. I devoted myself to my studies, and after graduating from college, I got a job at a food company called Inspiring Foods. This company not only manufactures and sells food products but also focuses on social welfare through food. Grandpa was the one who told me about it. A friend of his worked there, and he happened to hear about the job. "Maybe the job you want to do is here," Grandpa suggested. I was assigned to the sales department and tackled everything from copying documents to data entry and handling phone calls with all my might. I arrived at work earlier than anyone else and studied the material to learn about our products. I also accompanied skilled salespeople on their visits, wanting to learn the job quickly and become a full-fledged worker. However, there was one person who didn't think well of me, Eric, the head of the sales department. Eric was also a board member and held significant power within the company. There was a rumor that he didn't see any use in people who couldn't help him climb the career ladder and was especially tough on newcomers. True to the rumor, I was quickly targeted. Watching me ask a colleague to let me do anything, he seemed to think, "What an overbearing and cheeky newcomer." One day, he suddenly came to my desk and ordered me to come up with a proposal for a new product. "You seem like a hard worker, so you can do it in a day, right?" "Excuse me, that's a bit." Talking back as a newbie? "I'm sorry." Unable to object, I gathered all the ideas I could think of and somehow put together a proposal, which I submitted to him. It was a concept for a stir-fry vegetable sauce inspired by Grandma's cooking. Eric glanced at it and scoffed, pushing the proposal back to me. "Who would buy something like this? Our clients are looking for something more upscale. We don't need cheap stuff like this." "Haven't you ever eaten any good food?" "I'm afraid I'm not very familiar with upscale stuff. Could you perhaps give me a few tips on how to improve?" Use your own head to think. Well, I guess that's too much to ask from someone raised in a poor family. "Yes, sir." This kind of thing happened almost every day. Honestly, going to work became a struggle, but I had a reason I absolutely couldn't quit. I had a dream of taking my grandparents to a fancy restaurant with my first paycheck. I was sure they'd never been to a fancy place like that. They'd hardly ever eaten out. I thought to raise me, they must have made many sacrifices. I wanted to give them a little luxury for once. I wanted to treat them to an amazingly delicious feast. They raised me like their own family with no blood relation, and I wanted to repay their kindness as soon as I could. A month after I had entered the company, I finally received my first paycheck. I was proud of earning money through my own work. One of my colleagues recommended a fancy restaurant he had used for entertaining clients. So I made a reservation for 3 and called my grandparents. They were surprised when I suggested going to such a luxurious place, thinking we were going to a family diner or something. Are we really going into such a fancy place? Grandma seemed a bit confused. I got my first paycheck. It's money I earned myself as a working adult. It's always been my dream to treat you both, I said. Tears welled up in her eyes. It's all thanks to Carter's thoughtfulness. Let's enjoy the feast without holding back, Grandpa said happily. Nervous about our first time in such a restaurant, we stepped in. Then, from a back room, I heard a familiar voice. As the door opened, Eric came out. Hi, good evening, I said, reflexively straightening my posture. Why are you here? He looked at me curiously. Just having dinner with my family, I replied timidly. This place is for entertaining important clients, not for common folks like you. He scrutinized us and continued. Coming to a restaurant in such cheap attire is out of place. Even if you eat high-end food, you won't appreciate its value. Why don't you go to some cheap diner around the corner? His words pierced my heart. It was one thing for me, but I had made my grandparents feel bad too. That was far from the filial piety I had hoped for. Filled with frustration and shock, I couldn't say anything back. Then Grandpa, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. The one who's out of place is you, he said in a tone I had never heard him use before. Who do you think you're talking to? Eric started angrily coming towards Grandpa, but when he got a good look at Grandpa's face, he exclaimed loudly, Mr. King. Then he quickly went pale and sat down on the spot. Bringing happiness to everyone through the power of food, Grandpa murmured. That was the corporate philosophy of inspiring foods. I've been meaning to talk to you about it, Carter. Are you ready to hear me out? He began to speak quietly. Our family has owned vast lands for generations, which allowed us to live without want. One day, over 30 years ago, the president of Inspiring Foods came to us wanting to buy our land. He wanted to build a factory for his company to expand his business. Upon further discussion, I learned that Inspiring Foods had been donating food to children in foster care. The president grew up in a poor family himself, often going hungry. He had a strong desire to provide delicious meals to as many children as possible. He was passionate about expanding his business to support more orphan children, families, and those in need. I was deeply moved by his feelings. My wife and I have always loved children but were unable to have any of our own, so we decided to help his cause. We kept only the land necessary for our livelihood and gave the rest to him. Agreeing with the philosophy of bringing happiness to everyone through the power of food, I became a shareholder in Inspiring Foods and made further investments. I vowed to use my money to help those in need. We kept in touch ever since, and one day I visited the foster care with him. That's where I met you, Carter. While other children were fussing over not liking carrots or wanting pizza, you were the only one enjoying your meal, saying delicious with your mouth full. It was so adorable. I wanted you to be part of our family, to share meals together, so we adopted you. You grew up to be a very kind-hearted young man capable of empathy. That's why I thought you could be of service at a company like Inspiring Foods. That's admirable, Eric said, standing up and extending his hand to Grandpa. I made a bit of a mistake earlier. Carter is an exceptionally talented individual, he said, forcing a smile and stepping forward. Grandpa coldly shook off his hand. It's too late. You will never understand the true value of a meal, the value of sharing a table with loved ones. Inspiring Foods is a company that saves people through the power of food. You have no right to call yourself a part of Inspiring Foods. It was the first time I saw Grandpa raise his voice. I will inform the president of everything at tomorrow's shareholders meeting. When you return to the office, don't expect to find your seat there. Eric trembled and ran off as if fleeing the scene. That day, the three of us enjoyed a delicious feast. As we ate, they told me many things I never knew before. I was also able to tell them how hard I've been working. Did I manage to repay you too a bit? Of course. You've grown up and are working hard as a respectable adult. That's enough repayment for us, Grandpa said with a happy look. Today's meal will be an unforgettable memory, Grandma added, truly enjoying the time with the three of us. I felt our family bond deepen more than ever before. The next day, Eric was nowhere to be found at the company. Fearing that his harassment would come to light, he had vanished. In fact, after my case, there were multiple complaints from other new hires and employees who had been harassed by him, leading to his dismissal by the board. Gerald, the colleague who had recommended the fancy restaurant to me, became the new head of the sales department. No one has worked as hard as you in their first month, Gerald said, praising my efforts. He even took the time to review the proposal Eric had rejected, offering many suggestions. "You might become president one day," he said with a laugh, showing affection. "I want to continue gaining experience and someday take part in a business that delivers delicious meals to those in need. For now, I'm committed to giving my all to the work in front of me, to help create happy moments around the dining table for others. I work for the sake of society today, as always."